You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In this week's episode, we want to fill you in on some information we're receiving about the Sanitary District, the fixed-based operations out at the airport, and some of the information we've been receiving about the landfill. In order to talk about that, I brought in Dr. Joe Venosa from Salisbury. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mike Goldberg from Delmar. Thank you for coming out.
Howdy, howdy.
So, Mike, you have done some research about the fixed-base operation out at the airport, and basically, this is a new company that come in to replace Bayland Aviation Azure, right?
Yes, they've actually acquired Bayland Aviation. That will frequently include, flying lessons.
Okay.
The fuel pumping. I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe that is being maintained directly by the airport.
The new station is.
Yes, which is under construction, and it may be substantially complete at this point. I saw it a few weeks ago. The big question is the mechanics services. There's
the ability to have independent contractors out there.
Exactly. There's one very well qualified mechanic who's been operating out there for about 10 years. His lease it's a year-to-year lease. It expires at the end of this year. He doesn't know if he's going to be there or not. There seems to be a bit of a communication problem.
Well, you went out and you met with some of the pilots, and you interviewed not one from Salisbury, but one from in the surrounding area who flies into Salisbury sometimes.
I've been a pilot since the late 90s. Do all my own maintenance because the airplane that I built is an experimental, and I am licensed by the FAA to do all of my own maintenance on my airframe. I keep my airplane in Delaware. When I first moved here, Salisbury Airport did not have hangars available. Recently, I was considering moving my airplane to the Salisbury hangars. Salisbury has FAA flight facilities, instrument approaches, gasoline on the field. I'm reconsidering that due to some conversations that I've had with a number of folks that are currently at Salisbury regarding the ability to do my own maintenance. Since I'm authorized to do my own maintenance by the FAA, but would be prevented from doing my own maintenance at Salisbury, it really doesn't make sense any longer to consider moving there. Azure, they will be a monopoly on Salisbury Airport, and the current maintenance facilities that are available to aircraft owners are going to be limited and reduced, and you'll have to rely on Azure to do your maintenance. With that kind of movement away from general aviation friendliness, you're going to be driving aircraft owners away from the Salisbury Airport. Yes, I believe it'll be a disincentive for aircraft owners to remain and or arrive. Finding out about what has been going on and what is going on, I have not seen anything published in either news media or papers or anything like that. Most of what I've heard has been word of mouth. A monopoly could increase the cost. It really depends on what Azure wants to do.
After speaking with a number of general aviation pilots, some of them keep their private aircraft at Salisbury, and they're questioning whether or not it makes sense to do that. Because if you need mechanic services, you don't want to have one choice. You don't want a monopoly. You want to go to the guy that you've been working with, who knows your particular airplane and has been working on it for 10 years. But they're not. It appears they're not going to have that option because Azure apparently is going to be responsible for the 3 existing T hangars. So they're going to decide who can go in and do work and who can't. Some aircraft mechanics are mobile. They pull up in a truck, they do what they need to do either in the hangar or out on a concrete pad off the tarmac.
But they're not likely to be able to work inside the hangars now.
Seems like they're not going to be able to do that.
Well, so Joe, speaking about moving to Salisbury, moving some trash into Salisbury at the Wicomico landfill seems to be
planes and trash.
Yeah. There's been some rumblings that we may be seeing the landfill not open every day.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing.
So I mean, the tipping fees that the county executive proposed in her budget, actually the budget numbers had it at 100.
Yes.
They said that they needed to be at least at 88, and the county council has elected to move that rate at least to January 1st, so halfway through the fiscal year.
Right.
But I guess to maybe make a point, prove a point, or save a few dollars, we're going to close off the landfill? Is
Yes.
that right?
So imagine the situation, right? If you're a restaurant owner or a commercial hauler for that matter, and you get word that the county executive is now deciding what days businesses can actually drop off their trash. I don't know if anybody has seen this, but if you ever get a time, Google New York City 1977 garbage strike. Because that very well could be what parts of the county look like if the executive has her way. The idea,
This would be like the recycling center she just closed down overnight 2 years ago. A lot of people forgot about that.
Yeah, I didn't, but
that was fun.
It was. That's a word. And I think what people need to appreciate is that if the county executive is going to make this decision to just sort of randomly choose certain days or times where haulers and restaurant owners and other people have to throw off their trash, it's going to have a huge impact not only on their businesses and their logistics, but it's ultimately not really going to achieve, I think, what the goal is. And I think
It just would be double the trash come on Tuesday, right?
exactly, yeah.
And meanwhile, you have trash sitting in dumpsters over the weekend potentially at restaurants.
And it's interesting, too, because there seems to be a lot of questions about whether or not this is actually done because of a logistical need or just sort of for spite, because of the, well, let's just be honest. I mean, she was outmaneuvered pretty badly at that meeting. Fun to watch, but these are real issues. And so if she's going to go that route of having the government come down and put its, jackboot on the neck of every hauler and business because she's trying to prove a point.
But the other aspect that they talked about at the June 17th meeting is the sanitary district.
Yeah.
An update on countywide water and sewer.
Good afternoon, Adam Corey, Executive Director of Environmental Services, Department of Public Works.
And Mike Swaby, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Amanda Pollock, I'm with the Center for Watershed Protection.
Paul Wilbur, County Attorney.
Our presentation today highlights key recommendations that will guide municipal and county infrastructure expansion. Major sewer extension projects in Salisbury, Parsonsburg, Pittsville, and the West Side Regional System.
I want to bring in Bob Taylor, and I want to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of our sanitary district. That's sewer and water. And Mike, I want to ask you some questions later about how the RFPs, the requests for proposals, have been written for the engineer studies. And then I want to bring Bob in, talk about that, and then I'd like for the three of us to get back together and really kind of have a chance to digest what Bob said from an average citizen standpoint. All right? Can you guys
Sounds
stick
good.
around?
Sounds good.
Absolutely.
All right, Mike, you stay. We're going to bring Bob in, okay?
Okay.
So stay with us. We're going to bring Bob Taylor in to talk about water and sewer throughout the county and for city residents. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. The June 17th County Council meeting, they had a work session to discuss the sanitary district and some of the engineering plans. One person in particular spoke about the sanitary district, Mr. Bob Taylor. Thank you for coming out. Yeah. Mike Goldberg, thanks for being here. Bob, you spoke about the sanitary district and specifically just the setup and not just the engineering part of this. So I want to find out a little bit more. Why are you concerned about how the sanitary district is getting set up? Why do we even need one?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. Let's start with a little bit of background.
Okay.
One point that's, I think, very interesting. About 45% of the residents of the county already have water and sewer service.
Okay.
They live in municipalities, by and large. We also have some neighborhoods that are near city, that Salisbury and Delmar, but not in those towns, that have urban services districts over the years. So altogether, roughly half of the people in the county already have this service. So what we're talking about is really everywhere else. Now, they did a study, this has gone on for years, about what we should do. A lot of these homes and neighborhoods that are outside of the towns have older septic systems that are failing. They're also concerned about groundwater and even bay pollution from the septic systems.
2021, George Miles and Buer finished the water and sewer master plan for the county. Recommendations were for in areas where there are septic systems and the areas nearby a municipality to try to tie into that municipality. And then in the rural village areas to look at having standalone wastewater systems.
So that's been the driving force for years. Let's do something about that.
If you have a failing septic system on a lot that's not large enough for an additional septic system to be installed, you're kind of stuck. You're going to be pumping out like a holding tank forever and ever.
You got a real problem if you don't have reserve space for another drain field. There's a lot of problems you can have.
Including environmental problems.
County Council commissioned George Miles and Buer, an engineering firm here that has a lot of experience in sewer and water, to do a master plan for the entire county as to what would need to be done to essentially address these problems that I've mentioned. And they came up with two general solutions. One is there are a large number of homes up in the county that are very close to the municipalities but have not gotten the urban services. They figure there are a total of about 10,000 homes. So that's number one, and they recommended they can be connected to municipal systems. Then you get into a little bit further out and what are sometimes called urban villages. And just to identify a few, you've got Parsonburg, Nanticoke, Bivalve, Tyaskin. They're all essentially what they call rural villages. They developed over the years into small areas, but they're not incorporated. So anyway, that's the nature of the problem. And just to identify some of the costs they had, Mardella Springs, for example, if a plant were to be put in there to handle their 320 EDUs, I might point out an EDU is a theoretical 250 gallons per day.
EDU stands for equivalent dwelling unit.
Equivalent dwelling unit. The idea is that a typical dwelling unit uses 250 a day. And the George Miles and Buer study recommended in these areas that I've mentioned that by and large they would have their own new sewer treatment plants.
One for each area?
One for each area. Now there are a couple decided to go the sanitary district route to do this infrastructure upgrading that I've mentioned.
And how did they do that? Was it a legislative move? Was it a referendum?
It was a legislative move. What they had to do was request special legislation just for the county from the General Assembly. They got that 2 years ago to establish a sanitary district. They could have gone other routes. They could have had just the county just doing it with the Public Works Department. They could also form a sewer and water authority. There are several ways you can do it.
But they chose the sanitary district.
They chose the sanitary district.
So what makes the sanitary district unique? Like, how is it supposed to be set up?
In a general overview, smaller counties usually start with the sanitary district.
Okay.
Some of them still have it. Somerset County, for example, has had one for a number of years.
And you've worked with them.
Yeah, I've been involved with developers,
okay,
and owners with the Somerset County Sanitary District. State legislation essentially spells out how the sanitary district operates.
So how should it operate?
Well, I mean, to form it, all you have to do essentially is file articles of incorporation to incorporate the sanitary district as a Maryland corporation.
So it's an independent agency.
It's independent of the county.
Okay.
Yeah. Now,
but that doesn't seem to be the way it's being run right now.
Well, it's not being run right now at all because they haven't formed it yet.
Okay. Who should form it?
Well, the county council just decides by resolution or ordinance to record articles of incorporation with the state.
And who would be on the sanitary district?
It's three.
3 people.
And that's what ours is right now. If they want to form it, they have to do an articles of incorporation that name 3 commissioners.
Now, they're not voted on. They're appointed by the county council.
That's right. It's a county council matter under the state law. They haven't done it. Now, as we get into some of these projects that are now in the pipeline, so to speak, One question I have is, do we even need a sanitary district to do them?
So when we first met with you last year, we went through this implementation strategy. This is a long effort. This is many, many years. So 5 projects that we're going to talk about. First, just the Sanitary Commission. The first step was to get the state to enable that, so that legislation has been the last time we were before you was last December to talk about the structure of a Sanitary Commission. And at that point, what we were discussing was more of an advisory board structure. We've made some adjustments. We need to come back for the actual legislative process to have that adopted, and hopefully that will be in the next few months. And then the next step would be to be approving Sanitary Commission members, and then establishing that Sanitary Commission and having their first meeting and establishing all their bylaws, and then beginning to have quarterly Sanitary Commission meetings. It is now worded, and it's being reviewed by the county attorney, is that instead of having an advisory board, have 3 members that are appointed by the executive and confirmed by the council that would be the Sanitary Commission members. They would meet quarterly at a minimum, and then that all of their review is under the Public Works Department. So they would be making their recommendations to Public Works, and Public Works staff would be presenting to the Sanitary Commission when they have projects.
Because, for example, one of the projects is to tie in several areas around Salisbury into the Salisbury system. Now, the way they do that is the county puts in the mains and ties in the homes, and then they give the mains to the city.
Okay.
And the city operates them.
The Salisbury Sewer Extension projects. We had worked with the health department to look at areas adjacent to Salisbury city limits where there's some potentially failing septics or issues with septic systems. Part of the reason is because they can all be served by gravity sewer. So they're a little bit easier to serve than if a large pumping station would be required.
Okay.
It's done at the county's expense. Now, they can get grants for it, they can get loans for it, they can take it out of PAYGO. That's their problem. That's their matter.
Recently applied to hire an engineering firm to do the design. The bids were opened in May, and a selection committee has been reviewing those proposals. You funded design as part of the FY25 budget. We did include reimbursement for design in the request to the state for the SRF funding. The way that funding works is jurisdictions are required to forward fund design. So you have to pay for design first. Once a project goes for construction bids, that's when SRF funding is taken to the Maryland Board of Public Works, and then you can start seeking reimbursement for design. So we're still waiting. The July milestone is when MDE will announce what projects get funded this year. So we don't know yet if construction and this project will get funded. But either way, you needed to forward fund design. If we don't get funded this year, we'll be applying again next year, and you would be reimbursed for that design when the project gets funded. You're able to, at this point, fund design, which is wonderful. Construction, and I'll show you the cost in a few minutes, is much greater. We will need support from the state and others. So,
But you're also saying that sewer lines will be put in using whole county taxpayer money. How does that money get recouped? Is there a hookup fee?
Well, what I'm concerned about as a city resident, I'm already paying water and sewer. I've had it for years. I get no benefit out of tying in these areas around Salisbury, or for that matter, anywhere else in the county. And under state law, and this is common throughout the country, sanitary districts and water districts too are intended to be paid for by the people who use it, who benefit from it. Essentially an enterprise fund type operation, not by the...
There are already part of the county that are serviced by the city. They're called, you had a term for them.
Urban services districts.
So urban services districts, they already are hooked into the city. It's an agreement that you said goes back sometimes 40, 50 years?
Well, this started in the late 50s or early 60s, and the city did an agreement with the county to tie in lines without requiring annexation. In other words, without requiring the property to be brought into the city. Now, this project around Salisbury would essentially be almost the same as the urban services districts. In other words, the county puts in the infrastructure, gives it to the city operates it, bills the users, for it. Charges in the case of the city, they would charge a connection fee of about $6,000.
Do they pay the same for water and sewer that people who already live in the city
They
do?
pay at a higher rate.
Okay.
Yeah, they pay.
Do you think they know that? Like this is like, hey, we're going to put this pipe at your house, but you're going to get.
I don't know what they know because
Okay.
most of the public discussion that's been done doesn't really get into the costs. There's going to be a tie-in fee, a connection fee, and it's called a tap-in fee. And they total about $6,000 per home
Okay.
if you're outside of the city. The rates are for usage are going to be twice what the city rates are.
So this would fall under Salisbury's out-of-town service agreement. So there's an out-of-town service agreement that residents would be asked to sign.
Will they be responsible for a water and sewer bill just as they are now? with
Yes.
the 2 to 3 times the normal? Okay.
1.5 to 2 times.
1.5.
1.5.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but yes, they would be billed. We would need to be explaining to them that they would have an invoice.
So that's what needs a lot of outreach.
A lot of outreach.
What if you have a neighborhood that says, no, I don't want to be an urban service district. I don't want that water bill. How do you comply?
Part of that'll be leaning heavily on the health department, where they identified the areas. They'll have to talk through what the alternatives are. If their septic systems absolutely fail, they don't have reserve areas, and they're having to enter into pump and haul agreements, that will be much more expensive and not sustainable in the long term.
But I would just estimate that their annual sewer bill is going to be in the range probably of $1,200, $1,500 at our current rates.
Okay.
Of course, they're going to go up. So there's going to be a shock to some extent of people who, even if they don't have to pay the $6,000 tap-in and connection fee, they're definitely going to have to pay the consumption fee.
And there's two other areas, right? The Parsonsburg line that would come from Pittsville, and then possibly something on the west side.
We'll talk about Parsonsburg, Pittsville next. The map here is Maryland Department of Planning's map of priority funding areas. And again, that's critical here because Parsonsburg is designated as a rural village. And so only that rural village area is what is eligible for state funding. So Pittsville is currently going through a process of upgrading their wastewater plant, and they have submitted a preliminary engineering report. That included an allocation to serve some septic systems outside of Pittsville limits. Pittsville applied to USDA and MDE. They were able to take our PER and use that as an amendment so they could show the need for service outside of city limits. So the health department identified 2 mobile home parks between Parsonsburg and Pittsville that have shared facilities that need to be tied in as well. So that was included in the preliminary engineering report. To make it very clear, we've met with Pittsville a number of times. We cannot proceed with the Parsonsburg project until Pittsville's wastewater plant is upgraded. Pittsville's wastewater plant needs to get funded first, and they need to be rolling before we apply for Parsonsburg. The next project is the most complex, looking at the west side of the county in sort of a more regional basis. So knowing that Mardella Springs is the only incorporated municipality that does not have municipal water or sewer system, we wanted to look at not just Mardella Springs, but also Sharptown and Hebron, and mainly because Sharptown and Hebron are also just on the very early sides of starting to upgrade their wastewater plants. So they both need upgrades as well. So we had met with Hebron, Sharptown, and Mardella town officials when this first started back in 2023, and everyone agreed to let the county go through this point of doing the investigation. Does it make sense to have one regional plant or just Sharptown and Mardella only? We've looked at the San Domingo community, and then also where Mardella Middle and High School have a wastewater plant, would that be brought into the mix? It's going to be important to kind of talk about the Nanticoke River watershed as a whole, because that's what they'll be interested in, is that nutrient balance throughout the Nanticoke. Preliminary engineering report's a bit more complex, so it's taking a while. We actually just received a draft, and we're all going through that. It's like I said, long and complicated, and I didn't even want to put in cost numbers yet because we're still reviewing it. So it's not finalized, but we're hoping within the next month to finalize that, and then to go back and have meetings with the towns before we take it to the next level and start meeting with Maryland Department of the Environment and Maryland Department of Planning. So at this point, I can't even necessarily say the recommendations of the report because we're still just diving. We just received it. And
Yeah.
Now, out on the west side, they've just had a study, one of the contracts that Mike was to do, and just an engineer's recommendation for how to handle that area, including Mardella Springs, which does not have any sewer now. They've also talked about San Domingo, which is an area near Sharptown. The draft report has just come in from the engineering firm. We don't know what it says, at least I don't. But it wouldn't surprise me that for the same reason, to avoid having to put in a new treatment plant around Mardella Springs, that the idea is to somehow tie it in to either Hebron or Sharptown. And I understand both of those municipalities, their plants need to be upgraded.
So I have a source in Sharptown, and I understand on the draft they're proposing to pump Mardella, or at least part of Mardella, to Sharptown. Sharptown's wastewater treatment plant, much like Pittsville's current one, needs to be replaced.
And Hebron too.
I don't,
So if they
and I
decided
don't
to
know
go
about
that
Hebron.
route,
Yeah, but there's a question we should be asking, and folks in these small communities like Hebron and Sharptown, who you're paying part of your taxes right now to keep your wastewater treatment plant up and going, is the sanitary district that does not actually exist, are people who aren't accounted to the voters, are they being asked to basically consume this sewage?
Well, there's another aspect of this worth mentioning, and that is that when if you tied in, for example, Parsonsburg into Pittsville, the amount from Parsonsburg, based on the master study that George Miles and Buer did, would be more than what the demand is now in Pittsville.
Yeah.
So it would more than double, what's being treated. And that's the same with Sharptown. And the Mardella Springs would have more demand for sewer service than Sharptown does right now. And if you add in San Domingo, that throws in some more. I don't know how much.
And you got to wonder, is this even fair? You have these municipal sewage treatment plants. They're owned by the municipalities. And essentially, they're going to be forced to process sewage coming from outside those municipalities. I think the whole structure of the plan is potentially problematic. We should be looking at regional, county-owned, or sewage treatment plants, or owned by the sanitary sewer districts.
And that's what George Miles and Buer recommended.
Right.
But I mean, but even above that, currently, right now, we have RFPs and engineering dollars going out the door to make plans for something that does not suit the comprehensive plan that was put in place by GMB. And at the same time, we don't have a sanitary district who's managing this affair. If we wanted to build a toll bridge over a body of water, they could set up and incorporate basically a toll commission. They would have to collect tolls. They would have to apply for loans. They would build the bridge. They would be responsible. Right now, we have one branch of government that's off doing one thing, while we have our county council that, at least on the surface, doesn't seem like they're either one, finishing setting up the sanitary district, or explaining to us why they're delaying it.
And I'll go back to the 45%, almost 50% of the residents in the county that already live in municipalities or have services that we pay for. And we get no benefit from this.
You're paying more for somebody else's
And as any cost accounting. This should all be done on a cost accounting basis, so that the cost for a particular thing, Pittsville, whatever they do, that those costs are isolated.
Talk about the RFPs and what you've seen as...
There's been to date 4 different RFPs, request for proposals, issued by the county for engineering services, and covering different. 3 of them cover different parts of the county.
And this is separate from the master plan.
This is separate.
Okay.
There's a comprehensive plan, which is countywide, and then these subsections of the county, such as Parsonsburg, Pittsville, Hebron, Mardella Springs, Sharptown, etc.
So what are you finding out when you're looking at these RFPs?
Well, they concern me a little bit. The way that the RFPs are structured. There hasn't been a lot of participation from qualified engineering firms. And I think one of the reasons is that the scope of services that they're required to provide is very broad, and it's very difficult to ascertain what your actual engineering costs will be. These are all stipulated sum, lump sum bids. It's one price to do everything. But for instance, these contracts include construction phase services. That would be, inspections, acting as a liaison between the county and the construction contractor. And it's very difficult to determine how much that is going to cost. Typically, an RFP would say, okay, construction phase services will require 100 hours of an engineer's time, 200 hours of a CAD technician, et cetera, and you would bid on that basis. But what they're doing here is just saying, just give us a price for construction phase services, and
are we paying for this now?
We're not paying for it now, but when the contracts are let, and actually 3 of them have been let, it's only the comprehensive plan that has not been let because all of the bids came in above budget. So they
just like Bob said.
for the comp plan, right?
Okay.
But there's some strange anomalies. For instance, these engineering contracts provide for liquidate the damages for late completion. You don't see that in engineering contracts. That's something that you would see in a contract for construction, but not for engineering. There's also a requirement for performance and payment bonds. Most engineering firms can't get bonded. That's not part of what they do. Why that's included in the contract?
Who put out this RFP?
This was put out by the county.
By what part of the county?
By the Department of Public Works, I must assume. It just says the county.
I can maybe reflect on that. During the discussion at the county council last week, Amanda Pollock, who used to be with George Miles and Burr and used to also be the city's public works director, they drafted the RFPs. Now that's what she said. I don't know whether she drafted all of them or
but
just.
Amanda Pollock doesn't work for the council, and the council's supposed to set up this sanitary district, right?
She's been retained apparently by the executive branch of the county to do this.
So essentially, she's
well qualified.
She is. I've worked with Amanda before, and I think she's very well qualified and a pretty good person all around. But I find it odd that you have a third party, a private firm, who's putting this together on behalf of the county, who's setting the rules, issuing the RFP, when typically this would be done by the Department of Public Works. But
why wouldn't it be done by the Sanitary Commission?
Because right now we don't have a sanitary commission.
Not been set up.
Okay,
and it should have been by now.
So because we don't have a sanitary commission, basically the executive's office is driving this bus, and their choice is to hire a third party firm.
And at what cost, we don't know. Okay. This should be the county council doing this. The mandate has been given to the legislative body.
Well, what should citizens be asking right now?
Well, first of all, I think they're the 45% of us that live in areas, and why should any of our tax money go for this?
Okay. What if you live in Pittsville?
It's not going to be reimbursed.
What if you live in Pittsville right now? What should you be asking?
I think I would be thinking in Pittsville, if we're going to upgrade our plant and we're going to have excess capacity, we better start thinking about how we're going to use that. Are we going to give it away, essentially? They probably won't give it away. They'll get some money back for it. Yeah. But they won't be able, if they give it all away, to do any growth around Pittsville.
What if you live in Parsonsburg?
Well, that's a municipal village. And I think if you need the service, if you have failing septic, you're going to want something. One way or the other. Now, how whether you can afford it or not is another question.
I'm gonna question that point. And I know we have lots in Parsonsburg right now where we have abandoned homes that they're not building on because they don't have enough acreage there to have both a well and a septic and have the setbacks that you need. But if you put a home there in an area where that family cannot afford the hookup fees and that sort of thing, then what do you have? You don't have a resource at that point. You have a liability.
Well, there's a lot of questions to it, and a lot of it turns on how much do they get in grants or loans that are just waived over time.
It'd be really nice to know.
If they get pennies from heaven and it doesn't cost the residents much, well, then it might be worth it.
Those are obligations that to date are unfunded. We have no idea how much it's going to cost.
Well, thank you both. I appreciate you coming in and talking about the sanitary district. I hope some folks get out there and ask some more questions. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. So in the studio with me is Dr. Joe Venosa, Mr. Mike Goldberg. Thanks for staying.
Yes, sir.
Guys, we just had a chance to hear Bob Taylor. I know it's a lot to digest, everything he had to say. But at the end of the day, we're talking about water and sewer in parts of the county that aren't currently served.
Yeah.
And a lot of money being spent right now on plans. And Mike, I want to get a little bit more of your opinion about, just as a taxpayer in this county, like, how do you feel about where our money's being spent?
Well, I see a lot of money being spent. How much? Have no idea. All I can tell you is it's going to be a lot. Look, the county failed to make these kinds of comprehensive plans for sewer and water years ago. You know, we are now in a position where we're going to have to play catch up in order to comply with regulations being handed down from Annapolis. So where other municipalities or counties, across the state, they've been on top of this for many years. Wicomico County has not.
Even
now,
Bob said Somerset County has been in front of us for a long time.
and they've got a lot of issues because of their low elevations there and high groundwater.
And they're spread out.
Yep, absolutely. And so in a relatively few short years, I'm afraid that we're going to have to be spending literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to extend water and sewer to the population centers throughout the county.
And
how are we going to pay for this?
And the irony, too, is that doesn't actually have any real relation to the stated goal that some people have said, is that this is about sort of helping to augment and help build our, quote, growing population. Because one of the things that concerns me about this discussion, it isn't just the fact that it's a hodgepodge system where we're kind of bringing in certain municipalities and getting other ones to fund other places like Pittsburgh via Parsonsburg, but it's that in the end this is just servicing existing homes. This has nothing to do with building new units or new developments.
Yeah. This is not to put a new neighborhood in.
So this is really important. Anytime any citizen out there, whether you're a renter or a homeowner, if you're in Wicomico County and you hear about the development of the water and sewer plant, this has nothing, zero to do with actually building more housing stock.
Which would increase the tax base to help offset the cost.
Correct. What it is doing, it's basically, once again, it's going to overtax the people that do have homes or rent, and it doesn't do anything for you, the younger person that I tend to see a lot in my line of work, who might want to stay, whether it's because they're close to home or because they want to stay here, and you have very few housing options.
Well, even like you're much like Bob. You live in the city.
Right.
And you're already paying for water and sewer. And you're paying 6% more this year than last year.
Thank you, council.
Well, I'm glad he can afford it at least.
I was born handsome, not rich.
That's not what the SU budget says. SU budget says he's going to have to take less and pay more.
I got the pay stubs to prove it. It's good.
But at the same time, you're already paying for that.
Yeah.
And you're also, as a county resident, you're paying for these engineering plans. And like Mike said, you don't know how much. And we don't even have a sanitary district to ask questions to.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like
a sanitary commission.
Yeah, where is our sanitary commission that actually should be in the driver's seat for this? Because if that doesn't happen, then I guess the concern a lot of us have is, can the county executive, be it this current one or a different one, just put in people to then get this process going and operate with no real oversight?
Okay, well, let's play that game.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward a year. We'll be right at the tip of the high election season.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's say this county executive is running with a slate of candidates.
Yeah.
Are you putting all of those decisions in one basket? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or at the counterpoint to that is, should we be electing somebody a year from now who has experience with this? Because it seems like a lot would be being dropped on their shoulders coming in.
Well, the elected officials and their role is part of it. Again, from my point of view, and I think all of ours here, is that we would wish that the council would be more proactive now in getting the ball rolling to be the check and balance.
But we don't have that check and balance.
We don't.
And that is a problem. The responsibility for this is essentially falling on one person, the county executive, who has no experience with these kinds of issues. Not that anybody on the council has, a great deal of experience necessarily,
But the people
that's
on this
the
commission
purpose
would.
of the commission, where you would get qualified people who can make good decisions.
Yeah, I think we're relying on grants from both federal and state,
Yeah.
and the reality check here is we're dealing with a state that is broke.
And a federal government that, depending on if it's Tuesday or Thursday, could take away a grant.
Well, one would think if you wanted to implement a sanitary district vision, you would have a sanitary commission.
You would think so.
Otherwise, it's just we're shooting off from the hip.
They say that failing to plan is planning to fail.
Yeah, I agree
and
with
right
that.
now, we don't have a plan. And if it doesn't fail, it's darn sure going to cost a heck of a lot more money than it should because of the inefficiency that results from the failure to plan.
I think regardless of what you feel about all these issues, I think, if you wait to the last minute, it's going to cost more money.
Yeah.
It's just, it always does.
Your back's against
Well,
the wall. Yeah.
Let's keep our eye on it, and we'll update our viewers as more information comes out.
Definitely.
Thanks for watching this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back next week with another new episode. The views of this program